The sun was fading behind the dusty hills when a small figure appeared on the horizon. A thin, frail dog limped along a broken road, his paws cracked, his breath heavy, but his eyes, they burned with determination. Every few steps he stopped, looked back, and whimpered softly, as if calling someone behind him. This wasn't just any walk. This was a journey of love, pain, and unbreakable loyalty. 2 days earlier, deep in a quiet village at the edge of the forest, 2 stray dogs had found something they never knew before, a friendship that felt like family. One was Max, strong and watchful, the kind of dog who always took the lead. The other was Bruno, younger, playful, full of curiosity. Together, they searched for food, shared shade under the same tree, and curled up beside each other when the nights turned cold. But one afternoon, everything changed. A speeding truck thundered down the dirt road. Bruno, chasing after a fluttering piece of paper, didn't see it coming. The screech of tires broke the silence. When the dust settled, Bruno lay on the side of the road, trembling, his leg twisted painfully beneath him. Max ran to him, whining, circling, nudging his friend gently with his nose. Bruno tried to stand, but fell back, letting out a soft cry. There were no humans around. No help, only the sound of wind through the trees, and Max's quiet, desperate whimpers. That night, under a pale moon, Max didn't sleep. He stayed beside Bruno, licking his wounds, pressing close to keep him warm. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Max stood up, looked at his friend, and seemed to make a decision. He turned toward the village and started walking. For hours, he roamed through narrow streets, past shuttered shops and sleeping homes. He barked, scratched at doors, sniffed at gates, but no one came. Some villagers threw stones to chase him away. Others ignored him completely. But Max didn't stop. He had seen humans before, some kind, some cruel, but he still believed someone would listen. By afternoon, he found an old woman outside her small hut, feeding pigeons. He limped toward her, tail low, eyes pleading. The woman frowned at first, but then she saw the dirt and blood on his fur, the exhaustion in his steps. "What happened to you, boy?" she whispered. Max barked once, then looked over his shoulder toward the forest. He barked again, louder, urgent. The woman tilted her head, confused, but something in his eyes told her it mattered. She picked up her cane and followed. Max led the way, past the fields, across the creek, through the narrow path lined with thorny bushes. He paused often to check if she was still behind him. Every few minutes he barked again, as if calling out, "Hold on, Bruno. I'm coming back." The old woman's breath grew heavy, but she kept walking. There was something about this dog, something she couldn't ignore. After nearly an hour, they reached the clearing where Bruno lay. His eyes fluttered open when he heard Max's bark. The old woman gasped. "Oh, my dear," she murmured. Bruno's leg was badly swollen. Without hesitation, she knelt down, her wrinkled hands trembling as she touched the injured paw. Max stayed close, licking Bruno's face, tail wagging weakly. The old woman tied her scarf around Bruno's leg to keep it still. Then she whispered, "We'll get you home, little one." It took her time, but she carried Bruno in a basket and walked slowly back to her hut. Max followed right beside her, his head low, eyes fixed on his friend. Inside, she laid Bruno near the fire, cleaned his wounds, and wrapped them carefully with cloth. Max never left his side. He refused to eat or drink until Bruno's breathing steadied. For the first time in 2 days, Max rested, his head resting gently against Bruno's paw. But that peace wouldn't last long. Later that night, a storm began to brew. The winds howled through the trees, rain lashed against the walls, and thunder rolled across the sky. The old woman worried her roof might not hold. But what none of them knew was that something else, something dangerous, was moving closer through the forest. And Max, even in his exhaustion, could sense it. He lifted his head, ears twitching, eyes glowing in the dim light, and then he growled softly. Something was coming. The storm raged through the night, tearing branches from trees and flooding the dirt paths. Inside the small hut, the old woman kept the fire alive, clutching her blanket tight as thunder shook the walls. Max stood guard beside Bruno, his eyes darting toward the door every time the wind howled. His body was trembling, not from fear, but from instinct. Something outside wasn't right. A low growl escaped his throat. Then, through the sheets of rain, two glowing eyes appeared beyond the window. A shadow moved, slow, deliberate. The old woman froze. A wild boar, massive and furious, driven close to the village by the storm. It had already been scavenging through trash heaps and animal pens. Now, it had found the scent of food and weakness. The woman whispered, "Oh, dear God," clutching her cane. Bruno whimpered, still too weak to move. "But Max!" He stepped forward, muscles tight, teeth bared. He knew what he had to do. The door creaked as the boar rammed it once, twice, then it burst open with a crash. Rain and mud splattered across the floor. The old woman stumbled back, shouting for help that no one could hear. The fire flickered wildly. Max barked with everything he had. His voice filled the room like thunder. The boar charged, tusks flashing, and Max leapt to the side, snapping at its flank. The struggle was chaos, snarls, screams, and the pounding of hooves on the wooden floor. "Max, no!" the woman cried, but he didn't stop. Each time the boar turned toward Bruno, Max threw himself in its path. His small frame seemed powerless against the beast, but his courage was endless. He bit, dodged, and lunged until the boar, in rage, turned toward the open door and fled back into the storm. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of heavy rain. Max stood there, soaked and panting. Blood trickled down his shoulder where a tusk had grazed him. The old woman hurried to him, kneeling. "You brave, brave boy," she whispered, pressing a hand to his wound. Bruno, weak but alive, let out a soft bark, his way of saying thank you. Days passed. The storm cleared, the forest glistened, and slowly, life returned to peace. The woman cared for both dogs as if they were her own. She cleaned Max's wounds, fed him broth, and whispered him at night when he whimpered in his sleep. Bruno's leg began to heal. Each morning, he tried to stand a little longer. Max was always beside him, nudging, encouraging, refusing to let him give up. And one morning, it finally happened. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light over the fields. Bruno took a shaky step, then another. The woman clapped her hands in joy. Max barked, tail wagging furiously, circling his friend like he was celebrating a victory. For the first time in weeks, Bruno walked on his own. The old woman smiled, tears in her eyes. "You two were meant to find each other," she said softly. Months went by. The story of the two dogs spread to the nearby villages, how one had walked miles to save his injured friend. People began visiting the old woman's hut, bringing food, blankets, and supplies. A local rescuer heard the tale and offered to help find them a permanent home. But the woman smiled and shook her head. "They already have one," she said, watching Max and Bruno play in the yard. And she was right, because sometimes home isn't a place. It's a promise kept, a bond unbroken. In the evenings, as the sun dipped low, the two dogs would sit side by side at the gate, watching the horizon where their journey had begun. Max would nudge Bruno's shoulder, as if reminding him of how far they'd come, how love had carried them through fear, pain, and storm. One quiet night, as the stars shimmered above, Bruno rested his head against Max's and let out a long, peaceful sigh. The old woman sat on her porch, smiling softly at the sight. "You did it, my boys," she whispered. Max looked up at the stars one last time, his eyes calm, full of peace, and then closed them slowly, his breathing softening until it faded into stillness. Bruno lifted his head, nudged Max gently, and let out a low whine, the kind only a heart can make when it understands loss. The old woman wept quietly as she buried Max beneath the old oak outside her hut. She placed a small wooden marker and carved one word into it. Hero. From that day on, Bruno would visit that spot every sunrise. He'd sit quietly, watching the wind rustle